Hey everybody, so 2017 is almost over. I can't believe how fast this year has gone by. Now, it's been a crazy busy year for me, and I thought I'd spend this episode talking about one thing that I've learned this year. And it's one of those things where I had some strongly held beliefs, and that has certainly been challenged throughout the year. So to kick off this episode, we have to travel back in time to early 2017 when I was very humbled to be asked on the podcast post-mortem to talk about our game that had just launched back then, Conduct This. And this is what I said.
To me, like just taking a step back from that, imagine having been through this creative adventure, this Lord of the Rings trilogy adventure of making something. You've cast that ring into Mount Doom, right? This is your baby, like you've made it. Everyone's looking at each other teary-eyed. And at that point, you need to take on the accounting glasses and look at your game in a completely soulless way of these simple metrics. Do you retain people day one? Do you retain people day 7? Do you make enough money on every person enjoying your digital product, right? And that's just never going to be me.
So today I want to talk about game metrics. This act of quantifying and analyzing and tweaking all the variables in a game to make your numbers better and to really understand what's behind those numbers. And when I made those statements about it being soulless, I really meant it. And I still think there's part of it that's true, but running a game studio is a crazy, multifaceted job. And as with many other things in life, things are rarely black and white, right? So I guess this episode is kind of me diving into how I've come to terms with analyzing and tweaking and changing the numbers and what that has meant for us as a small game studio. So 2017 has been a crazy busy year for the entire team. We have shipped what feels like 3 separate games actually. First of all, I think 80% of all the content in Conduct This has been shipped in 2017. That is so much more of the game than when we launched. It is a much bigger game this year. We've worked hard on taking something that got a lot of attention and making sure that it thrived and that there was more content and growing and expanding the world, right? And as you've seen on these vlogs, we've shipped DLCs. We actually just shipped another DLC, but we've also added a bunch of free content to the game. And I'm pretty proud to say that early December, we crossed the 3 million download mark. So it's been an incredible year for Conduct This. Now, other than that, we actually shipped a separate game called Conduct AR, which ended up being its own standalone experience, featured by Apple, and this was sort of an augmented reality game that we launched right at the launch of iOS 11. A monumental task with new technologies, and we learned a bunch. I'll get back to that and I'll talk more about that some other time. This December, right at the end of the year here, we shipped the PC version of the game called Conduct Deluxe, which also ended up being a completely different game in many ways. A level editor, new visuals. So in many ways, it really feels like we've shipped 3 separate games this past year. We've also done a bunch of work on other things that we can't show just yet, and a whole bunch of client work. All in all, 2017 has been crazy busy. Company Christmas party! We announced the game today.
Står bare vlogger. Forstyrrer mig.
Last minute testing. Food.
Rask.
Let the fun begin!
Fedt! Først koldt. Så kan du kolde. Jeg tror, jeg er ikke blot. Hvad er det der? Det er sådan noget salat. Jeg kød salat. Nej, det er sgu ikke sådan der.
Face ID doesn't work with this. God jul! When you run a game studio like this, you get to wear many different hats. You get to just throw yourself at many different concepts that you maybe don't have that much experience with. Game metrics is certainly one of those things. Definitely listening to the statements that I made in that early podcast, I totally understand past Michael. I understand why I felt that way. And I guess a part of me still kind of feels that way. But there's that sort of strongly held belief, and then there's reality on the other side. And the reality is that looking at the metrics of your game is a pretty vital part of making it on these platforms. Ultimately, what it actually means is that with those numbers, you can get feedback from players that they're not able to articulate themselves. So you can look at those numbers and find the pitfalls of your game or the weaknesses of your game, and you can try to mend them and make them better so that more people will enjoy your game. And after making those statements in early 2017, that's actually what we have done for Conduct This. And I thought that I'd go through very quickly some of the changes that we've made in the game and how that has impacted it, because this is what happened. It's a couple of months after I went on the podcast, and we're looking over the numbers for Conduct This. I mean, we still have Unity Analytics. We're looking through the different funnels, how many people get through the different levels. Those numbers in themselves are pretty interesting. What we looked at was how many people get through the first world. That's 4 levels. And those levels are uniquely designed to just teach the basics of the game, really. We looked at that first world, those 4 levels, and we looked at the percentage of people who got through all 4 levels, and we were incredibly surprised. First and foremost, only 15% of our player base gets through the first 4 levels in Conduct This. Now that is crazy. It doesn't even really represent the game. It's more of a prolonged tutorial in a way. All the fun stuff happens after those 4 levels. After the 4 levels, you unlock your first train, your first trophy, you get to unlock the second world. But looking at these stats, 85% of everyone who downloads and start that first level does not get to experience any of that. 85%. I'd never expected this to be, 50% or 40% or anything like that. I know that first and foremost, we've been featured many times, which means that a lot of people are going to get into the game, start it, and then put it away because it wasn't for them. That's kind of what happens when you get featured. You get a lot of players in that are really not interested. They're not your players. And that can definitely muddy the data. I also know that Conduct This is a very difficult game. It's never gonna be for everyone. We know that, we designed for that, but still, taking those 2 things into consideration, I was still very, very surprised that 85% of all our players never got to experience any of the content or the fun stuff that happens later in the game. They simply don't get through those first 4 levels. Also, because the working thesis here was that if people were only allowed enough time in the game to get invested in the game mechanic and to understand what was going on, I think more of those people would stick around. I don't think it's because 85% of all the players that come into contact with our game are just not interested in the game. I think it's much more likely that many of these people get frustrated with these first few levels here. They don't have enough time in the game to learn how to play it and then to become invested and care about it. Anyways, I am pretty happy to report that it is now more than 30% of the players that start the first level that actually get through those first 4 levels. So how did we change it? How did we double it? We took a good hard look at those 4 bars on Unity Analytics and looked at the percentage drop off for each level, and then we went into each level and applied techniques to improve them. That involved slowing down time, making the first couple of levels easier in general. And particularly, we saw a huge drop off in the second level. There's this moment where a secondary train is introduced for the first time. If you do nothing, that train will crash into your first train. So this is just sort of the game teaching the player, whoops, this happens, there's a secondary train, you didn't see it, it just explodes, right? But the percentage drop off of players there were just colossal. So what we did was actually we slow down time and we give people a pointer over the secondary train. Now this is such a balancing act, right? And this is kind of where we're bordering what I talked about in that podcast. We don't want to pander to players. We don't want to create a game that has arrows everywhere or is telling everyone what to do at every step. But it is significant to look at those numbers and see how many people never give this game a chance because they get so frustrated with that initial introduction to the game mechanic of having multiple trains. So we simply went in there and improved that situation. After we implemented that, a lot more people got through, and we implemented similar measures in some of those first levels. We cut back on time and passenger goals, just making them a little easier to slide through, right? And this whole thesis was, if we can get more people through that first world, we would have more dedicated players coming out the other end, simply because they had more time to get invested in the game rather than just being frustrated up front. It's crazy looking at those bars in Unity Analytics now. We have doubled the amount of players that actually get through that first world using those tactics. Pretty simple things. It took us like a week to implement these things, right? Out of the 3.5 million downloads that we now have, it basically boils down to hundreds of thousands of extra people getting to play and enjoy and get invested in our game. So this is pretty much me going on the record saying I was wrong in that initial interview. Game metrics doesn't have to be soulless. It can be, and it certainly can have some of those qualities that I talked about in that podcast. But if you do it right, you're gonna have more people enjoying your product. Another thing that we're trying right now is actually to see if we can get it to go even higher than 30%. We wanted to add like a visual cue in the world saying like, if you get to this point, you'll get something exciting here. You wanna give people something to strive for, right? At the macro level of things. The way we wanted to solve that was actually to put that present into the world so that everyone starting out right from the beginning could see that after these next 4 levels, there's gonna be something interesting there.
Very nice.
Fluff one
Outglow. Working on a little bit of animation here.
I'm rotating them terribly wrong.
I think that's fine. That's good. Ship it.
Yeah.
Ship it. That did not help at all.
We just need some motion blur.
Did you fix it?
Yes.
It's fine now.
It's totally fixed now.
Yeah, it's good. It's
You really want to get that present.
yeah.
By the way,
There's something inside it.
There's something inside the present.
I think those are things that we, the only thing is that
Much better. This is so cool. The rainbow. It's beautiful. So, what did you do at work today?
Made it happen.
Made it happen.
We made rainbows.
We made rainbow stroke scroll.
It took 3 people 1 hour to make a rainbow.
Don't tell. Don't tell the internet that.
Hashtag game development.
Hashtag game development. Yeah, this is the real life of game developers. 3 people celebrating a scrolling rainbow stroke.
Looks fantastic.
It needs more rainbow.
Looks amazing.
I like it. It's very Nintendo.
It's the outline for everything from now on.
Yeah, just make all of it rainbow scrolling.
Yeah.
Actually, I have another idea.
Okay.
It needs something else. What does it need?
More colors.
More rainbow. More rainbow.
The material.
Adding more rainbow. I like that today. I'm literally the hovering art director. Like, do this, do more of this, more rainbow. So as the year ends, I think it's nice to look back at what we've learned these past 12 months. Once strongly held beliefs gets challenged, and hopefully we get out the other side with a more nuanced look at how we improve the work that we do while still retaining a little bit of our soul in it. It's been an amazing year for me personally. I hope you guys have had a great year as well. And I'll see you guys back in 2018, where I'll hopefully vlog a little more.